The month is September, 1758. As always happens at this time of year, a thick fog has rolled up over the fens near the town of Elsbridge. And a man is lost in the swamps. He's staggering about, calling for help, disoriented and alone. His name is Peter Carnane, and he owns a shop in the town. But where is the town? In this mist, it's impossible to see. He's almost given up hope, and darkness is setting in. But then, the town bell strikes, tolling its deep notes through the valley. Peter rushes towards the sound, clutching at it like a lifeline. And then, at last, the warm lights of Elsbridge town come into view. Mr. Carnane has been saved from the fog of the fens. The inhabitants of Elsbridge don't know it quite yet, but after this event, Mr. Peter Carnane will go on to give some of his land to the church because of his saviour, the church bell, under one condition: that any rent collected from this land is used to finance a daily ring of the bell in the half hour before sunset, every day, forever. Although the need for the bell is now gone in the 21st century, it is still rung every evening as a token gesture, and there is a tablet in the church that tells this story. It's stories like these that make Sodor, the world of the Railway series, feel so real. Every place on the island seems to have them, whether it's the story of how Sigrid of Arlesdale held off the second Norman invasion at Casnehoen, or how the Fat Controller explodes in a rage of swearing after discovering he'd been sold a knockoff in the form of Henry. Sodor is full of anecdotes. Every lake, every engine, every saint has a little tale attached, it seems. And I think this is what puts it up there with the likes of Middle-earth and the other giants of fantasy world building. Why? In the world of film, there's a thing called diegetic music. Diegetic music is part of the world that is being portrayed. If we take an example from Thomas, this brass band in Lost Treasure is diegetic because the characters can hear it. It's not just been added over the top of the movie like the opening credits music has been. Well, I'm making the case that Awdry was addicted to diegetic storytelling. Awdry doesn't just tell us stories about characters, he tells us about characters who tell stories. This is something that's present right from his first book, when the island wasn't even really a thing yet. The sad story of Henry, for example, starts with a nursery rhyme that we can well imagine a Sudrian parent singing to their child. We all know the words: once an engine attached to a train was afraid of a few drops of rain, and so on. What's so important is that this isn't the last time that song appears in the series. 11 books later, in The Eight Famous Engines, Percy mockingly sings it again.
He ran off to the harbor singing. Once an engine attached to a train was afraid of a few drops of rain.
Think for a second about how many in-universe stories there are in the Railway series. Duke's story, for example, told by Peter Sam and Sir Handel, is what gets him rescued. Book 20 is basically one long storytelling session, told by Skarloey. James's driver talks about an incident in Bincombe Tunnel. The story of the ghost train is told by Percy's driver to Percy, who then passes it on to Thomas and Toby. Culdee tells the terrifying story of Godred. Duke tells the terrifying story of Stanley. Stepney tells Edward pages and pages worth about the Bluebell Railway, so on and so on. Songs are also a big thing, and it's not just the one about Henry and the rain. In the first 26 books, how many songs or rhymes do you think the characters sing? 5? 10? The answer? 27. This proves to me that one thing Awdry did to make the world of the Railway series real was to create worlds within it, to build stories inside stories, and to build songs inside songs. To go back to Peter Carnane and the church bell at Elsbridge, it feels real because the Carnane bell is only rung today because of the story. There's no functional use for it anymore. They've probably built much better paths across the Elves Fens, but it lives on because of the legend. The Carnane bell, like the Railway series, is a monument to storytelling. The Island of Sodor lore book is absolutely full of stuff like this. If you ever get a chance, go and read about James Catherick's run-in with the people of Crosby over their prized stone cross, or about the Book of Sir Harold being discovered in the ruins of Ulfstead Castle, and how that affects the Skarloey Railway many miles away. It's this anecdotal world-building, this respect for the power of storytelling, that makes Wilbert's stories feel so real. There's a depth here that no other children's books really have, that many, many books targeted at adults don't have. It's what makes them a mythos, a legendarium. There's a sense of oral tradition there, stories that have been passed down through the generations. There's a really wonderful passage in the Island of Sodor book where Audrey is describing the story of Duke the Lost Engine and how it led to Duke's rediscovery, where he says this: "It was hard to imagine that there ever had been a shed, let alone an engine inside it. Local people were, however, convinced of it, and after listening to tale after tale beginning, 'My father used to say,' or 'My grandfather told me once,' your author, the thin clergyman, was inclined to believe it too." It's probably quite significant that Audrey, the thin clergyman himself, plays such a big role in the search for Duke. The whole operation, particularly the conversation with the miniature engines, is framed in terms of Audrey writing his books. The Railway series exists within its own universe, of course, and although incidents like Frank pulling a hissy fit because he wasn't included in the books are funny, I also think they point to something much bigger. Although this was mostly a Railway series thing, there are moments in some of the original TV stories that also feature legends and myths like this. It's why Duncan Gets Spooked is such a powerful episode, or why the opening of Scaredy Engines is so atmospheric, and why even some hit-era episodes that feature Proteus or The Curse of the Cliffs actually feel more grounded in reality. Often it happens in the quiet moments. This short piece in Oliver's Find, where the Fat Controller just looks pensively at a house for a bit, is one of my favourite moments in the whole show.
It was an empty old house beside the station. He went to inspect it.
Even though they're working to a 5-minute runtime, the scriptwriters imply so much depth and story here. You know there's a history to this place. Telling stories is something that only humans do, as far as we know, and so when the engines like Rusty or Edward tell stories, they also become more human, more real. Now of course there are lots more reasons that Sodor feels so alive. There's the use of humour, the technical accuracy, and so on. But I think this is the most overlooked. Audrey's stories are all about stories. His words are all about words. It makes sense. After all, he based most of his material on real railway stories, real railway incidents. That's the magic, the realist kind of magic that Sodor evokes in us. The magic of good storytelling. I don't know about you, but I don't think Gold Dust and LSD Railroads come even close to that. As for the Carnane Bell, I must say, if you're ever visiting the area yourself, I hear the Curragh, or the Fenland Museum as it's more commonly called, is a must-see for the local history of Thomas's branch line. After that, I'd recommend a walk around the fens where Peter Carnane nearly met his maker, and if you want to stay the night, then the Trout, the Char, the Railway Arms and the Bridge are all quality establishments in the town of Elsbridge itself. If you should ever find yourself lost in the region, never fear, for as the sun sets, you'll hear the ritual chime of the Carnane Bell, calling you home.